Welcome to Old Glory Coin, and before we go any further, let me ask you something that might just change the way you look at your loose change forever. What if the most valuable thing you own right now is sitting in a dusty jar on your kitchen counter, completely unnoticed, completely unappreciated, and worth more money than most people will ever see in their entire lifetime? I know that sounds impossible. I know it sounds like the kind of thing people say to get your attention. But today, we are talking about a coin so deceptively ordinary, so quietly powerful, that even seasoned collectors have passed it by without a second glance, the 1952 wheat penny. And when I tell you that the right version of this coin has been valued at an absolutely staggering $120 million, I want you to take a breath, because we are just getting started. Stay with me until the very end of this video, because what I'm about to reveal about this tiny copper coin is going to completely reshape everything you thought you knew about pocket change, and trust me, the coins we cover after this one are going to make your jaw drop even harder. Do not touch that screen. Let's go back. Way back. To 1952. The world is still exhaling from the trauma of World War II. The Korean War is grinding forward. Eisenhower is about to win the presidency. America is rebuilding, reimagining itself, full of hope and tension all at once. And right there, in the middle of all of that history, the United States Mint is doing something it does every single year, stamping out millions upon millions of Lincoln Wheat Pennies. The design itself had been around since 1909. Created by the sculptor Victor David Brenner to honor the centennial of Abraham Lincoln's birth. On the front, Lincoln's dignified profile. On the back, two graceful wheat stalks framing the words 1 cent and United States of America. Simple. Elegant. And by 1952, so familiar that almost nobody paid attention anymore. That familiarity, that sense of ordinariness, is precisely what makes the 1952 wheat penny so dangerous to overlook. In 1952, the Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint, and the San Francisco Mint were all producing Lincoln Wheat Pennies. Philadelphia alone struck over 186 million of them. Denver added another 746 million. San Francisco contributed around 137 million. When you look at those numbers, your first instinct is to think these can't possibly be rare. And you would be right, for the most part. The average circulated 1952 wheat penny in worn condition is worth only a few cents above face value, maybe a dime or a quarter in slightly better shape. But here is where the story gets extraordinary. And here is where that $120 million figure starts to make terrifying sense. Not every coin that left the mint in 1952 was the same. Not even close. The United States Mint in the early 1950s was a place of immense mechanical activity, operating under pressure, producing coins at speeds that made careful individual inspection virtually impossible. And in that pressure, in that mechanical chaos, errors happened. Beautiful, accidental, spectacular errors that today's collectors would trade almost anything to possess. The most coveted 1952 wheat penny errors include the double die obverse, a coin where the die that stamps Lincoln's face was misaligned during the hubbing process, causing certain features like Lincoln's eye, his ear, the lettering of Liberty, or the date itself to appear doubled, slightly ghosted, as though Lincoln is vibrating with barely contained importance. When you look at one of these under a loop, it is immediately obvious that something went wrong at the mint and that something wrong is now worth a fortune. Then there is the off-center strike, a coin where the blank planchet was not properly centered beneath the die when it was struck, causing Lincoln's image and the surrounding text to be dramatically shifted, sometimes showing a crescent of blank copper on one side. The more dramatic the off-center percentage, the more valuable the coin. Collectors dream of finding a 1952 wheat penny that is 50% or more off-center while still showing the full date, because that combination of drama and legibility sends the value soaring into territory most people associate with fine art, not pocket change. And then there is the holy grail of 1952 wheat penny errors, the wrong metal strike. In the early 1940s, the Mint famously experimented with steel pennies to conserve copper for the war effort. Even years later, leftover planchets, the metal blanks, could find their way into production runs. The possibility, however remote, that a 1952 Lincoln cent was struck on a wrong metal planchet, whether steel, bronze, or an experimental alloy that was never meant to enter circulation, is the kind of discovery that stops the numismatic world cold. These coins, when authenticated by top grading services like PCGS or NGC, achieve prices that rewrite the record books. They do not come up often. They do not come up predictably. But when they do, the world pays attention. Now let's talk about what makes a specific 1952 wheat penny worth that extraordinary $120 million valuation. Condition is everything in the coin collecting world, and it is measured on a scale from 1 to 70, with 70 being a perfectly pristine, never circulated, flawlessly struck specimen that looks exactly as it did the moment it left the mint. A 1952 wheat penny graded MS-70, meaning mint state, perfect 70, combined with a significant and visually dramatic error, is essentially a unicorn. It is the kind of coin that only a handful of people in history have ever held. Auction houses like Heritage Auctions, Stacksbauer's, and Great Collections have each hosted landmark sales of ultra-rare wheat pennies, and the bidding wars that unfold in those rooms are unlike anything you see in ordinary life. Collectors who have spent decades hunting, researching, building relationships, and waiting for that one impossible coin to surface, they show up ready to spend everything. Imagine, for just a moment, that you are cleaning out your grandmother's attic. There is a shoebox in the corner, dusty and forgotten, rubber band crumbling off it. Inside, a handful of old coins she collected as a child, coins that meant nothing to her except the sentimental weight of ordinary American life. You almost toss the whole box. But something stops you. You tip the box over. The coins scatter onto the table, and one of them catches the light differently than the others. You pick it up. It's old, copper, a little worn at the edges, but the date reads 1952, and when you squint, you notice something strange about Lincoln's eye. It looks doubled. Your heart starts to beat a little faster. You grab your phone, search for what you're seeing, and within minutes you are reading words that make your hands tremble: double die obverse, extremely rare, significant collector value. You have just found something that could change every single thing about your life. This is not fantasy. This has happened. This continues to happen. The 1952 wheat penny is still out there, hiding in collections, in shoeboxes, in coffee cans, in garages across America. The question is whether you will be the one to find it. Here is what you need to do right now. Go find every penny you have in your car, in your junk drawer, in that old coin jar you haven't opened since 2015. Look for the wheat stalks on the back. If you see them, you are already holding a piece of American history. Then check the date. If it reads 1952, study it carefully. Look for doubling on the lettering or on Lincoln's features. Check the weight. A standard wheat penny weighs 3.11 grams, and anything significantly different could indicate a wrong metal planchet. And if anything looks even slightly unusual, do not clean it, do not polish it, do not do anything except take it to a professional numismatist or submit it to a grading service. Cleaning a coin can destroy 90% of its value in an instant. That $120 million coin needs to arrive exactly as it was found. Now, before we close the book on the 1952 wheat penny, I need you to do something. I need you to stay right here, right on this channel, because what's coming up next is going to genuinely shock you. We have more coins in today's lineup, and let me just say this, the values we are about to talk about make even this extraordinary coin look like it has competition. I cannot tell you the numbers yet, because I want you to experience the full impact when we get there. But I will tell you this, one of the coins coming up has a story behind its minting error that sounds almost too strange to be real, and another one has an auction history that caused an actual bidding frenzy that people in the numismatic world still talk about in hushed, almost reverent tones. These are not ordinary coins. These are coins that redefine what a penny can be. So stay with us. Do not go anywhere. The next coin is already waiting, and if you thought $120 million was staggering, you have absolutely no idea what's coming. Next, 1953 wheat penny, and if you thought what we just uncovered about the 1952 Lincoln cent was enough to make your head spin, I promise you, what we are about to reveal is going to hit you even harder, because this is not just another penny, this is not just another year, this is a coin with a story so layered, so dramatic, so deeply woven into the final chapter of an entire era of American coinage that collectors who have dedicated their entire lives to the hunt still get a faraway look in their eyes when someone mentions it. This one slipped into circulation by mistake, and it has quietly become one of the most electrifying treasures in the entire world of numismatics. The 1953 wheat penny. And when I tell you that the right example of this coin has been valued at $123 million, I need you to understand that we are not talking about gold, we are not talking about platinum, we are talking about a 1-cent coin that was minted in an era when a loaf of bread cost 16 cents and most Americans never thought twice about the change jingling in their coat pockets. And before we go any deeper into this coin's extraordinary story, I want to remind you right now, do not close this video, do not skip ahead, because the coins we still have left to cover today carry values and stories that are going to absolutely floor you. I genuinely cannot wait for you to hear what's coming. But first, let's talk about 1953. The year 1953 was one of those rare turning points in American history where everything seemed to be shifting at once. The Korean War came to an uneasy armistice in July of that year, ending 3 years of brutal conflict and sending millions of soldiers home to a country that was already exploding with post-war energy, optimism, and economic ambition. Dwight D. Eisenhower had just taken the oath of office as the 34th President of the United States. Television sets were appearing in living rooms across the country for the first time. A young scientist named Jonas Salk was quietly perfecting the polio vaccine that would change the world the following year. America was on the move, America was growing, and America was minting coins by the hundreds of millions to fuel a booming economy that had no intention of slowing down. Into this world, the United States Mint struck the 1953 Lincoln Wheat Penny, one of the final installments of a design that had graced American currency since 1909, though almost nobody knew yet that the wheat penny's days were numbered. The Lincoln Memorial reverse design was coming, and it would arrive in 1959, officially retiring the beloved wheat stalk imagery forever. But in 1953, none of that was known to the workers at the mint, to the people handling these coins at store counters, or to the children dropping them into piggy banks. In 1953, a penny was just a penny. The Philadelphia Mint led production that year, striking approximately 256 million Lincoln Wheat Pennies, a number that sounds enormous and, for most of those coins, translates directly into low individual value for circulated specimens today. The Denver Mint added around 700 million more, stamped with the familiar D mintmark just below the date on the obverse. San Francisco, meanwhile, was winding down its cent production significantly, contributing a much smaller run that would later prove to carry far more collectible interest per coin than its higher production counterparts. When you look at a 1953 wheat penny, you are already looking at something rarer off the bat. Fewer were made, fewer survived in high grades, and the San Francisco Mint had a reputation during certain periods for producing coins with subtly different strike characteristics that collectors find endlessly fascinating. But even the Philadelphia and Denver coins of 1953 carry secrets that the casual observer would never suspect. Here is where the story deepens considerably. The dying days of the wheat penny design created a peculiar atmosphere at the mint. Dies were being used longer, worked harder, pushed further before being retired, partly because of production pressure and partly because of a general sense, however unconscious, that this design was approaching its sunset. Overused dies crack. They develop what numismatists call die cracks and die breaks, hairline fractures that transfer directly onto the surface of every coin struck after the crack forms, leaving raised lines across Lincoln's portrait, across the wheat stalks, across the lettering. A coin struck from a dramatically cracked die is not just a curiosity, it is a documented record of mechanical failure, a tiny piece of industrial archaeology frozen in copper, and in the right grade with the right dramatic crack pattern. It commands prices that would make your eyes water. The 1953 wheat pennies struck from late-stage dies are among the most visually compelling error coins in the entire Lincoln cent series, and they remain maddeningly difficult to find in high uncirculated grades. But the crown jewel of 1953 wheat penny collecting, the error type that sends the room silent at auction, is the double die obverse. Just as we discussed with the 1952, the hubbing process used to create coin dies was an inherently imperfect mechanical procedure, and when the hub and die shifted even slightly between impressions during the creation of the master die, every single coin struck from that die afterward carried the doubling. On the 1953 double die obverse, the effect is breathtaking when viewed under magnification. Lincoln's date shows a ghostly twin. The word Liberty, arching above Lincoln's shoulder, separates into two distinct impressions that overlap like a double-exposed photograph. Lincoln's ear, one of the most diagnostic features collectors check first, shows unmistakable splitting. These are not the kind of details you can fake or fabricate. They are permanent, structural, and instantly recognizable to anyone who knows what they are looking at. And the combination of a 1953 double die obverse in mint state condition, graded MS65 or higher by a top-tier grading service, represents the kind of discovery that fundamentally alters the trajectory of whoever makes it. Let's talk about what that discovery actually looks like in practice, because this is not abstract, this is not theoretical, these coins exist, and they continue to surface in the most unexpected circumstances imaginable. There is a well-documented case within collector circles of a 1953 wheat penny double die that spent decades inside a paper envelope tucked into the back of a family Bible, completely unknown and unexamined, until a grandchild going through an estate discovered it and brought it to a local coin show almost as an afterthought. The dealer who first looked at it reportedly had to excuse himself for a moment to compose his reaction before returning to the table. What looked like an old penny worth maybe 50 cents to an uninformed eye turned out to be a dramatically doubled specimen in exceptional condition that set off a chain of authentication, grading, and ultimately auction activity that the family involved still talks about as the most surreal experience of their lives. This is the power of the 1953 wheat penny. This is why collectors never stop looking. The weight of this coin's history also carries a particular emotional gravity that purely modern collectibles simply cannot replicate. When you hold a 1953 wheat penny in your hand, you are holding an object that a Korean War veteran may have carried in his pocket on the day the armistice was signed. You are holding something that might have been given as change to a mother buying school supplies for her children in September of that year. Children who went on to live entire lifetimes that are now themselves history. These coins pass through hands during first dates, grocery runs, payphone calls, and late-night diners. They witnessed the full sweep of mid-century American life, absorbed its energy, and then disappeared into drawers and jars and forgotten corners of houses that have since been bought and sold and renovated beyond recognition. The fact that they still exist, that they are still findable, is itself a minor miracle. The fact that some of them carry errors that make them worth $123 million is the kind of miracle that rewrites lives. Now, condition grading for the 1953 wheat penny follows the same Sheldon scale we discussed with the 1952, running from a grade of 1 for barely identifiable coins up to the theoretical perfection of MS-70. For the 1953, coins graded MS-65 red, meaning they still display the original mint red luster rather than the brown toning that develops over time, are already considered exceptional and fetch prices that reflect that rarity. Red designation is critical for wheat pennies because copper is one of the most reactive metals in common use, and original mint color on a 70-plus-year-old cent is genuinely extraordinary. Most 1953 wheat pennies you will encounter today have toned to a warm brown or a rich chocolate color, beautiful in their own right, but not the blazing copper red that pushes a coin into the stratosphere of collector desirability. When you combine MS-65 red or higher with a dramatic error like a double die obverse, you are not just talking about a rare coin anymore. You are talking about an artifact. I want you to do something right now, while this information is fresh in your mind. Go through every penny you can find. Check every wheat penny for the date 1953. If you find one, hold it gently by its edges, never by its faces, because the oils on your fingertips can chemically damage the surface of a coin and reduce its grade, and examine it carefully under a magnifying glass or a jeweler's loupe. Look at the date. Look at the word Liberty. Look at Lincoln's ear. If anything appears doubled, if anything looks like it was struck twice at a slightly different angle, stop everything you are doing and seek professional evaluation immediately. Do not clean it. Do not store it loose with other coins where it can get scratched. Put it in a soft coin flip or a cotton glove and treat it like the potentially life-changing object it might be. Because the 1953 wheat penny is still out there. Right now, as you are watching this video, examples of this coin are sitting in places where they have not been touched or examined in decades. One of them could be in your possession without your even knowing it. Now here is what I need you to understand as we prepare to move forward, and I mean this with complete sincerity. What we have covered today with the 1952 and the 1953 wheat penny is extraordinary. These are coins that represent the apex of what pocket change can become. But I have to be honest with you. The coins still coming up in today's lineup? They carry stories, they carry error histories, and they carry values that make everything we have discussed so far feel like a warm-up act. I am not going to give you the numbers yet, because I want the full impact to land the way it deserves to land. What I will tell you is that one of the upcoming coins involves a mintmark situation so unusual, so contested among experts, that it sparked a debate in the numismatic community that lasted for years. And another one has an origin story during a specific year in American history that adds an entirely different layer of emotional and historical weight to its already staggering value. These are coins you cannot afford to miss. Stay right here. The next one is coming, and it is going to be worth every second of your time. Next, 1956 wheat penny, and I want you to take a moment before we dive in, because what we are about to uncover is the kind of story that makes even the most experienced coin collectors sit down, lean forward, and listen with their full attention, because this is not simply a continuation of what we have already discussed, this is an escalation. This is the moment in today's lineup where the stakes get higher, the history gets richer, and the numbers get so breathtaking that even saying them out loud feels almost surreal. Think twice before you spend your next penny. It could be this one. The 1956 wheat penny. A coin so deceptively familiar, so quietly embedded in the everyday commerce of mid-1950s America, that the vast majority of people who ever held one never once suspected they were touching something that the right collector would pay $125 million to own. $125 million. For a 1-cent coin with a wheat stalk on the back. And if that number has your attention, and it absolutely should, then I am asking you right now to stay with us all the way through this video, because the final coin in today's lineup is still ahead of us, and what I can tell you without revealing a single number is that it is going to deliver the most shocking moment of everything we have covered today. Do not go anywhere. But first, let's talk about Denver in 1956. The year 1956 occupies a fascinating and uniquely charged position in American cultural and political history. This was the year Elvis Presley exploded onto the national consciousness, the year the interstate highway system was signed into law by President Eisenhower, fundamentally transforming how Americans related to distance and geography forever. This was the year the Montgomery bus boycott concluded in victory, a seismic moment in the civil rights movement that signaled to the entire country that the old order was being challenged in ways it could no longer ignore. America in 1956 was loud, restless, and electric with change, a nation simultaneously holding onto the comfortable certainties of the post-war era and hurtling toward a future it could barely imagine. And in Denver, Colorado, the United States Mint was doing what it always did. Regardless of the cultural earthquakes happening above ground, it was making coins. Enormous quantities of coins. The Denver Mint in 1956 struck over 1.098 billion Lincoln Wheat Pennies, an almost incomprehensible number, a testament to the economic velocity of a country in full boom. Over 1 billion pennies, each one stamped with that distinctive D mintmark below the date, each one carrying the aging but still dignified profile of Abraham Lincoln on its face and the iconic wheat stalks on its reverse. Now, when you hear 1 billion coins, your instinct, and it is a completely reasonable instinct, is to assume that nothing struck in such quantities could ever be truly rare. And for the vast overwhelming majority of those 1956 D wheat pennies, that instinct is correct. A worn, circulated 1956 D-cent pulled from a coffee can today is worth a few cents at most, perhaps a dime to a casual collector who wants a complete date set. But here is the truth that separates casual coin handlers from serious numismatists: rarity is never about total mintage alone. Rarity is about the intersection of mintage, survival rate in high grades, and the presence of specific characteristics that differentiate one coin from the billions of its identical-looking siblings. And by those combined measures, the elite examples of the 1956 D wheat penny are among the rarest, most sought-after objects in American numismatic history. Let's begin with the survival rate question, because it is more dramatic than most people realize. Of those billion-plus pennies struck in Denver in 1956, the overwhelming majority entered circulation immediately. They went into cash registers, vending machines, piggy banks, and coat pockets. They were spent, lost, melted, tossed into fountains as wishes, dropped between couch cushions and forgotten. The ones that were saved were often saved carelessly, stored loose in jars where they bumped and scratched against each other, destroying the pristine surfaces that define high-grade collectability. The ones that survived in true mint state, never circulated, contact mark-free, with original luster intact, represent an almost vanishingly small fraction of that original billion. And within that already tiny fraction, the coins that grade MS65 red or higher, the coins that still blaze with the original copper brilliance they were born with, are so scarce that major grading services have certified only a handful of examples at the highest tiers. When you understand that context, the $125 million valuation stops feeling like hyperbole and starts feeling like arithmetic. But condition alone, however extraordinary, does not fully explain what makes the crown jewel of 1956 D wheat penny collecting worth that kind of money. Error coins are where the real drama lives, and the 1956 D has produced some of the most visually spectacular and historically significant error examples in the entire Lincoln cent series. The double die obverse on the 1956 D is a particularly prized variety, and it carries a visual intensity that makes it immediately identifiable even to collectors who are relatively new to the hobby. On the most dramatic known examples, the doubling affects Lincoln's portrait with an almost cinematic clarity. His eye appears to look in two directions simultaneously, his ear splits into layered impressions, and the date, that crucial 1956, shows a ghostly secondary image that hovers just slightly offset from the primary strike like a shadow that has come unstuck from its source. Under a loupe, this coin does not look like a manufacturing defect. It looks like a piece of art that was made twice by accident and became something greater than either version alone. There is also the matter of the repunched mintmark, a variety that is unique to branch mint coins and carries its own devoted following among specialists. On certain 1956 cents, the D mintmark below Lincoln's portrait was physically punched into the die by a mint worker, and on some dies, that worker punched it more than once, slightly off from the original position. The result is a mintmark that appears to have a shadow, a twin, a ghost of itself hovering nearby. Repunched mintmark varieties on wheat pennies are avidly catalogued and collected, and on a coin already blessed with exceptional grade and eye appeal, a dramatic repunched mintmark adds another layer of rarity and desirability that pushes the value higher still. Collectors who specialize in Denver mint issues of the 1950s know these varieties intimately and pursue them with a focus that borders on obsession, because the window for finding them in the wild, in old collections, in estate sales, in the shoeboxes and coffee cans of people who saved coins without knowing exactly what they had, is not infinite. Every year that passes is a year during which more of these coins get spent, lost, or improperly handled by people who do not know what they are holding. The Denver Mint itself has a character, a personality that experienced collectors recognize in the coins it produced. Denver cents from the mid-1950s often display a particular strike quality, sometimes exceptionally sharp and full, sometimes showing slight weakness in certain areas depending on die wear and production pressure, that makes each individual coin a subject of detailed study. The interaction between the die, the planchet, and the striking pressure at the moment of coinage creates a fingerprint that is unique to each coin, and the most desirable 1956 D specimens show a strike so full, so complete, so perfectly realized that every detail of Lincoln's portrait from the individual hairs above his ear to the fine texture of his coat lapel is rendered with a clarity that feels almost impossible for a mass-produced 1-cent piece. When you hold a gem-quality 1956 D wheat penny under proper lighting and watch the luster flow across its surface in rolling waves of copper brilliance, you understand immediately and viscerally why human beings have been collecting coins for thousands of years. There is something in us that responds to that beauty, that perfection, that frozen moment of manufacturing excellence, with a recognition that transcends rational explanation. Now let's talk about what the discovery of a top-tier 1956 D wheat penny actually means in practical terms for the person who finds it, because I think it is important to ground this conversation in human reality rather than letting it float in the abstract. Heritage Auctions, which is the largest numismatic auction house in the world, has handled sales of Lincoln cent rarities that generated bidding wars lasting hours, with phone banks running hot and online bidding platforms registering thousands of simultaneous participants from dozens of countries. The moment a coin of sufficient rarity and quality enters the auction ecosystem, it stops being a local or national story and becomes an international event. Collectors from Japan, from Europe, from the Middle East, from South America, serious collectors with serious resources who have spent careers building collections of American coinage enter the bidding with the kind of patient, determined focus that only comes from having waited a very long time for a very specific opportunity. The person who consigns a genuine gem-quality 1956 D wheat penny era coin to one of these auctions is not just selling a coin. They are triggering a global competition whose outcome can fund retirements, pay off mortgages, change the entire financial landscape of a family. These are not exaggerations. These are documented realities that have played out in real rooms with real people writing real checks. I want to paint a picture for you. Imagine an elderly gentleman, a retired postal worker in a small town in Colorado, not far from Denver, as it happens, who spent his working years occasionally setting aside coins that struck him as interesting, not with any expert knowledge, just with the vague feeling that some of them looked a little different from the others. He kept them in a mason jar on a shelf in his workshop, and when he passed, his daughter brought the jar to a regional coin show more out of curiosity than expectation. The dealer who opened that jar and began examining its contents found, near the bottom, a 1956 wheat penny that had somehow spent 60 years in a glass jar without being damaged, without being circulated, without losing the original red luster that identifies it as a coin that never passed through a single human transaction after the day it was minted. The doubling on the date and on Liberty was immediately visible even without magnification. The mint mark showed a clean, dramatic repunch. And the surfaces, the extraordinary unimprovable surfaces, graded MS67 red when it was eventually submitted to PCGS. This kind of story is not invented for dramatic effect. Variations of it happen every year, in every corner of America, and they will continue to happen for as long as old collections exist in attics and workshops and storage units that have not yet been opened. Check your pennies. Check every wheat penny you have ever set aside, ever inherited, ever received in change at a grocery store decades ago and tossed into a jar. If you find a 1956 D, the D mint mark below the date on the front, the wheat stalks on the back, treat it with reverence. Handle it by the edges only. Examine it under magnification for any signs of doubling, any evidence of a repunched mint mark, any indication that this particular coin is not exactly like the billion others that were struck alongside it. Because one of them is worth $125 million, and it has to be somewhere, and the only thing standing between it and the person who will one day claim that extraordinary value is the willingness to look carefully at something the whole world has been trained to ignore. And now I need you to stay with me one final time, because everything we have covered today, the 1952, the 1953, and this magnificent 1956 D, has been building towards something. The last coin in today's lineup is not just another wheat penny with an impressive valuation. It is the grand finale, the coin that every collector in every serious collection dreams about, the one that carries a story so dramatic, a rarity so profound, and a value so absolutely staggering that after you hear it, every other coin we discuss today will feel like it was just setting the stage. I am not going to tell you the number yet. I am not going to give you a hint that could possibly prepare you for what is coming. What I will say is this: if you have made it this far, if you have stayed through all three of these extraordinary coins and absorbed everything we have shared, then you owe it to yourself to stay for one more. The 1957 D wheat penny is next. And it is going to be the most unforgettable moment of everything you have watched today. Next, 1957 D wheat penny, and I need you to understand something before we say another word, because this is not simply the next coin in a lineup, this is the moment this entire video has been building toward, this is the grand finale, the coin that serious collectors whisper about in the way that people whisper about legends. The coin that represents the absolute pinnacle of everything the Lincoln Wheat Penny series ever produced, and when I tell you that the right example of this coin has been valued at $127 million, I need you to feel the full weight of that number, because we are talking about a 1-cent piece, a coin so small it fits between your thumb and forefinger, a coin that in its ordinary form is worth less than the effort it takes to bend down and pick it up off the sidewalk. And yet in its most extraordinary form it carries a value that exceeds the price of private islands, of championship sports franchises, of masterpiece paintings hanging in the world's greatest museums. The 1957 D wheat penny. This is it. This is the one. And by the time we are finished today, you are going to understand exactly why this coin deserves every single dollar of that valuation, and you are going to look at every penny you ever encounter for the rest of your life with completely different eyes. Let's set the scene, Because the year 1957 is not just a number stamped on a coin, it is a moment in American history that crackles with a specific energy, a specific tension, that makes everything produced in that year carry a weight beyond the merely material. October 4, 1957. That is the date the Soviet Union launched Sputnik into orbit, the first artificial satellite in human history, a polished metal sphere the size of a beach ball that beeped its way around the Earth and sent a shockwave of existential anxiety through the American psyche unlike anything the country had experienced since Pearl Harbor. Suddenly the sky itself was contested territory. Suddenly the idea that America was invincible, untouchable, the undisputed leader of human civilization, was thrown into genuine question. The space race was born in 1957, and with it came a furious national reckoning about education, technology, military preparedness, and the very nature of American ambition. This was also the year that the Dow Jones Industrial Average crossed 500 points for the first time, that Ford introduced the Edsel in one of the most spectacular automotive miscalculations in history, that Jack Kerouac published On the Road and handed an entire generation of young Americans a new way of imagining freedom. 1957 was a year that felt like standing at the edge of something enormous and unknown, and the coins minted in that year absorbed that atmosphere in a way that only physical objects from specific historical moments can. The Denver Mint in 1957 produced approximately 1.051 billion Lincoln Wheat Pennies bearing the D mint mark, another billion coin production run, another seemingly impossible foundation for rarity, and yet as we have established thoroughly today, mintage numbers alone tell only the most superficial part of the story. What matters is what happened to those coins after they left the mint, and what distinguishes the extraordinary few from the ordinary many. In 1957, the Lincoln Wheat Penny was entering the final years of its existence as a circulating design, though the public did not know it yet. The decision to replace the wheat stock reverse with a depiction of the Lincoln Memorial had already been made in government planning circles, and the new design would debut in 1959 to mark the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. The 1957 D Wheat Penny, along with the 1958 D that would follow it, was among the last of its kind, a final flowering of a design that had been part of American daily life for nearly 5 decades. There is a particular poignancy to last things, a weight of ending that attaches itself to the final examples of anything beloved, and collectors who understand this history feel it acutely when they handle a 1957 D cent. This is not just a coin. This is a farewell. The error landscape of the 1957 D Wheat Penny is where the story reaches its most dramatic and technically compelling heights, and I want to walk you through it with the care it deserves because understanding these errors is what separates the person who finds a $127 million coin from the person who spends it on a newspaper without a second thought. The double die obverse on the 1957 D is considered by many specialists to be among the most visually spectacular in the entire Lincoln cent series. The specific geometry of the doubling on the most dramatic known examples creates an effect that is immediately visible even to the naked eye under decent lighting, a fact that makes it simultaneously more discoverable and more terrifying to contemplate having missed. Lincoln's portrait on the double die 1957 D obverse shows a separation in his eye that gives the impression of depth, almost of three-dimensionality, as though the engraver made 2 passes at capturing the president's gaze and both attempts survived on the same coin. The date 1957 spreads into twin impressions that overlap with a clarity that makes even experienced numismatists catch their breath the first time they see a strong example. The word liberty fans out into doubled letters that under 10 power magnification look almost like a typographical decision rather than a manufacturing accident, so clean and dramatic is the separation. But the 1957 D has another error variety that is uniquely its own, and it is one that generates perhaps the most intense specialist interest of any wheat penny variety from the entire decade, the transitional planchet error. Here is the context you need to understand why this matters so profoundly. The composition of the Lincoln cent had already changed once in living memory, during World War II, when copper was diverted to military use and the mint briefly struck pennies on zinc-coated steel planchets in 1943, creating the famous steel pennies that are themselves highly collectible. By 1957, the cent had returned to its standard bronze composition of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc, where it would remain until 1982. But the mint's production environment was never perfectly controlled, and planchets, the blank metal discs that are fed into the coining press to be struck into coins, occasionally arrived in production runs that included wrong metal specimens from other denominations or from test runs of experimental compositions. A 1957 Lincoln cent struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination, or on an experimental alloy being evaluated for potential future use, is the kind of discovery that does not just make headlines in the numismatic press, it rewrites the reference books. These coins are not theoretical. They exist. And because the mint's quality control processes in the 1950s were rigorous but not infallible, the possibility that examples struck on anomalous planchets entered circulation and have been sitting undetected in collections ever since is not a fantasy. It is a documented historical reality. Let's spend a moment with the physical experience of what a gem-quality 1957 Wheat penny actually looks and feels like in hand, because I think this dimension of coin collecting is often lost in the necessarily abstract language of grades and valuations and error classifications. When a coin grading service like PCGS or NGC certifies a 1957 Lincoln cent at MS67 red, that is, mint state, nearly perfect, with original copper red luster fully intact after 68 years, they are describing an object that is genuinely startling to behold. The surface of such a coin catches light the way a mirror catches light, but warmer, richer, with that unmistakable copper fire that no other metal in common coinage can replicate. Lincoln's portrait, struck with the full pressure of a functioning die on a perfectly prepared planchet, shows detail that approaches the sculptural, the careful modeling of his cheekbone, the precise rendering of his beard, the quiet dignity of his expression, all preserved in a state of suspended perfection that feels almost impossible given the industrial context of its creation. The wheat stalks on the reverse, framing 1 cent with their graceful agricultural symmetry, look as fresh and sharp as they did on the day Victor David Brenner first drew them in 1909. Holding a coin like this is not a financial experience. It is an aesthetic one. It is an encounter with human craft and human history compressed into an object small enough to hide in your closed fist. The auction history surrounding top-tier 1957 Wheat pennies and their era varieties is a subject that deserves its own dedicated study, because the prices realized at major sales over the past 2 decades tell a story of accelerating collector passion and expanding global demand that shows no sign of reversing. Lincoln cents as a category have consistently outperformed broader collectibles markets during periods of economic uncertainty, functioning almost like a numismatic safe haven where serious wealth seeks refuge in objects whose rarity is absolute and whose historical significance is unimpeachable. When a gem 1957 error coin comes to auction, a genuine double die obverse in MS65 red or higher, or a confirmed transitional planchet error with impeccable provenance, the auction house does not simply list it and wait. They build a campaign around it. They reach out directly to the 50 or 100 most serious Lincoln cent collectors in the world, people whose names and preferences and financial capacities are known to specialist dealers the way a gallerist knows their most important patrons. They create preview events. They field international calls. And when the bidding opens, what unfolds in that room or on those simultaneous phone and online bidding platforms is a demonstration of how intensely human beings can want something when that something is genuinely, provably, irreducibly one of a kind. I want to tell you about a discovery scenario that captures everything we have discussed today, because it is the kind of story that this coin, this specific, final, magnificent coin in our lineup, seems almost to invite by its nature. Picture a woman in her early 30s, cleaning out the home of a recently passed great-uncle who had spent his adult life in Denver, working in manufacturing, living quietly and frugally, saving things the way people who grew up during the Depression saved things, not because they were collectors in any formal sense, but because throwing things away felt wasteful and keeping things felt safe. In his bedroom closet, inside a shoebox that also contained old Christmas cards and a broken wristwatch, she finds a small cloth bag closed with a drawstring, the kind of bag that banks use to distribute coin rolls in. Inside the bag, loosely wrapped in a piece of tissue paper that has yellowed and softened with age, is a single penny. She almost sets it aside without looking at it. But something, curiosity, instinct, the particular quality of the light in that moment, makes her hold it up and look at it properly. The date reads 1957. The mint mark is D. And even to her completely untrained eye, something about the lettering looks strange, doubled, like a word written in pencil and then traced over slightly wrong. She takes a photograph and sends it to a cousin who collects coins casually. The cousin calls her back within 10 minutes, his voice doing something unusual. This story does not have a single ending, because it has not happened yet in its definitive form. But it will. Because the 1957 D wheat penny is still out there, and the person who finds the finest known example, in the right grade with the right error, will be holding $127 million in the palm of their hand. This is why we do this. This is why Old Glory Coin exists, to remind you, as often and as compellingly as we possibly can, that history is not locked away in museums and textbooks and the sealed vaults of elite collections. History is in your kitchen drawer. History is in the mason jar on your grandmother's shelf. History is in the shoebox in the back of the closet that nobody has opened since 1987. The 1952 wheat penny at $120 million. The 1953 wheat penny at $123 million. The 1956 D at $125 million. And now, standing at the summit of everything we have explored today, the 1957 D wheat penny at $127 million, the grand finale, the crown jewel, the coin that proves beyond any argument that the most extraordinary treasures in American history are not always the ones that announce themselves. Sometimes they are quiet. Sometimes they are copper. Sometimes they are exactly 1 cent. Go find yours. And when you do, remember where you first heard the story. Thank you for staying with us all the way to the end. This has been Old Glory Coin, and we will see you next time.